Well, they are mostly spent on product development and ecosystem development. Product development specifically, we are investing deeply in AI in order to actually analyze the physical and mental health data that we are collecting from our users, and then spin it up into analytics, HR analytics for employers to make better HR decisions, right? So that's really investing a lot in engineering, in product, on our research partnerships as well. The second is really ecosystem development, right? Unlike traditional EAP providers, which really just provide therapists for one-on-one booking, we actually spend a lot of time building communities among the therapists and coaches across Asia as well. You'll be surprised how many of them, are unable to actually share their expertise outside of a one-on-one booking session. This is a lot of value that is actually lost to the community and society at large, right? I don't know whether you have had much chance to speak to therapists. I have tried to speak to more on our end as well, but they have a lot to say about productivity, what the future of the workplace is. Maybe you should invite one of them for your next few tech talks as well, right? So long story short, we are working with them to co-create content, testing new features with them as well. And this is where we are spending most of the funding on. Well, we are focused on the Asia Pacific region, right? And in terms of the Asia Pacific region, we are focused on the APAC headquarters, and that's Singapore, Hong Kong, and Australia, right? That's where a lot of the APAC headquarters are. Despite the headquarters being in each of these 3 different markets, they actually have their workforces spread out across 16 different locations, right? So what we do is that we make sure that our providers and our programs are localized to each of these 16 different markets. And we want to really ace it first because, the Asia Pacific region is very unique, right? Unlike most of the American or Western players in mental health, right? You cannot have a copy and paste approach from the West over to Asia. You have Muslim majority countries and markets. You have, different markets like East Asia and Korea and Japan. They need a more localized approach, right? We don't just do translation. We want to make sure that we develop the content, and actually that's something that requires time, not just money, in order to innovate. And that's the markets that we actually want to emphasize on.
Fantastic. So when clients ask us, we want to expand in Southeast Asia, we tell them it's not just one region, but it's actually 10 different countries. So a lot more effort needs to go into customizing for each of these 10 countries.
Exactly, right? I mean, I always like to talk, share with my investors as well, or even some of my curious clients. They ask me like, well, what's your business strategy? I'm just curious. And I tell them, let's look at Uber versus Grab, right? Uber lost in this region. Whereas Grab, I remember going to Bali, and the approach that the Grab team actually did in the Indonesian market, specifically Bali, was around how they dealt with taxi networks, right? When I traveled to Vietnam, it sounded like a long time ago because we haven't been traveling for a while, I understood how the Grab marketing for drivers was actually very different, right? The value proposition was different in terms of payment, in terms of way they build the ecosystem and communicate to the drivers versus how they do it in Singapore and Malaysia, right? That, I think, is the secret sauce. You cannot adopt a one-size-fits-all approach. We got to understand the region and how to build a better product and solution around it. I like to answer that question with the double A. One is apathy, and the other one is alignment, right? The key business challenges right now with employers is that their workforces have been working so hard, pulling such long shifts at home. Suddenly they tell them to go back to the office. Suddenly the lockdown happens as well. There is beginning to be a disconnect, right? And that's where the misalignment happens between their own personal values and the organizational values. They ask themselves, does this company care enough for me to stay here long term? It is a talent retention issue. When your best people do well and perform well and they are asked to work more, you run the risk of burnout. You run the risk of that spreading like a contagion, right? It is not a pandemic that is actually contagious alone, right? It is also the contagion of disillusionment, of apathy. I'm working so hard and then I have to work even harder and then I go to even more long hours. And then there are some people who don't work hard and then I have to carry the company or the team on my own. is a talent retention issue for sure, right? The talent retention issue is also one of the reasons why we hear about great resignation, right? I mean, different reports in Asia talk about how the numbers could be as high as 25%, right? And anecdotally, I was at a CEO dinner just 2 weeks ago in Shangri-La, and around the table, we just had 5 of us, right? But we did a quick poll around the 50 people in that ballroom. And, you know, like turnover is an issue, right? Even if they don't send in that resignation letter, during one-on-ones, you're hearing people, you know, like just run out of topics to talk about. You wonder what they are thinking, right? That misalignment must be addressed. I think that business retention issue is key, because if you don't actually hold on to a talent, you then begin to have a business hiring problem, and then we run into a high hiring cost, and we become a very costly affair for all employers. Well, quick answer is that mental health and wellness is too new, right? And I think there is a natural skepticism to something so new, so overly featured in the media, and being bandied around as a panacea, a solution that will cure all the ills in the workplace, right? So I think you know, like it's important for companies to walk in to adopt mental health solutions with analytical mind and understanding why they prioritize it, because there's a lot of knee-jerk employers who just you know, like do what we call checklist buying. Let me get an EAP, check off the box. Okay, well, we got an EAP, right? If employees ask me, do you have a mental health program? Yeah, we do, right? Run a few lunchtime talks as well, right? That tends to be the impulsive reaction. But the best employers, our best clients, are those who technically spend more time doing research, evaluating the different providers, and understanding the differences as well, right? This is why, you know, like we spend a lot of time articulating our differentiation, right? That is also mentioned in our funding news. We focus on cultural competence because Asia requires a solution that's culturally relevant, not one size fits all, right? Second thing as well is that mental health is very hard to quantify the ROI, right? There are a bunch of research articles that they have to learn and read out of Harvard and so on and so forth, right? A lot of mental health players like ourselves, you know, we are working hard on having research partnerships. We're working hard on shrinking decades of organizational psychology research into bite-sized snippets for HR leaders to digest. You are a content provider and creator as well. You know the difficulty that it may take as well to actually get there, right? And so that's very important as well, you know, quantifying the ROI. Third, and last but not least, is regarding the stigma, right? Employers may wish to promote certain programs, but you know, you will rarely hear employees talk about their strong need for mental health as well, right? When typically we see the younger workforces, the younger millennials actually share more openly about how their mental health suffered during this situation, whereas the older, the non-millennial, you know, like employees, you know, like myself and, you know, like folks older than me as well, you know, like they might be more hesitant, right? They might be more hesitant. I would say that, you know, I'm on the tail end of the millennial, non-millennial divide, right? I'm 40 this year, you know, so I can kind of like identify with the conversations on both ends and the hesitance due to the stigma that is prevalent in the workplace. Well, there are two things. One is executive support, and the second is data science or data savviness, to be more accurate. Executive support goes a very long way, right? We need leaders who believe in it. They may not be the final decision maker, but if they are supportive, it goes a long way in providing their workforces the moral encouragement and inspiration, right? To be vulnerable. And it's also one of the bigger trends in leadership as well. You talk about compassionate leadership, right? MBA schools all around are teaching about that, you know, like how the best leaders these days are authentic. Piyush Gupta, DBS, right? The LinkedIn founders and so on, right? More of them are coming out. We need more of them to come out to share about their own personal mental health struggles, because being a leader is tough. You go through a roller coaster ride where it's actually, there are more emotional downs than emotional ups as well. So having executive support is important because it helps to provide enough fuel for HR to actually promote the programs and initiatives inside, right? Because otherwise you'll sound really hollow when you have a leader who actually doesn't open up and doesn't, you know, like endorse the program. The second is actually data science. Now HRMS systems have the dime and dozen, you know, like HRMS systems out there. HR practitioners, leaders cannot run away from talking about how they prioritize data science. I don't think you've actually like gone through a single interview or spoken to a leader who says that data is not important, right? Now, this is where it's important to actually make that connection between the data inside those HRMS, absenteeism, presenteeism, sick days, right? Productivity levels and so on, and marry that with mental health. This connects to my previous point as well. You want to quantify ROI? A good mental health player needs to start thinking like a HR tech player, right? Rather than a healthcare provider. Because honestly speaking, right, being a healthcare startup is very different from being a HR tech startup, right? In a company, honestly speaking, how many people will be sick to actually require psychiatry help? The levels are quite low. It's really like less than 5% as well. When the employees fall sick, you need to provide and support them as well and nurse them back to health. But then, you know, like a lot of mental health providers over-index and overemphasize on the healthcare need such that they ignore some of the bread and butter issues faced by HR leaders, right? I have worked in multiple different countries over the past 17 years as well, and I've seen the differences in organizational cultures between the US, China, Singapore, or Vietnam, right? It is important that, you know, we actually do make sure that we have the data science and the executive support, right? Come out more strongly. And I think those are really strong driving forces and game changers to increase employee mental wellness tech adoption. I think, you know, one other good example, if you don't mind me, you know, like riffing a little bit more on this, is that there's data everywhere. HR practitioners are swimming in data, right? But there's not enough, data is like a new oil, but there's not enough oil rigs to really channel it to insights, right?
Right.
Yes, because there's so much of this data, but then you wonder, what are the solutions? Employee engagement surveys, there's so much of those players out there as well, right? There's a lot of data being shared, but not enough actually compressed, refined into insights and recommendations. For mental health players like us as well, you know, like we're moving in that direction. We're looking at how we can work with that data, how we can work with employee survey providers out there. How can we work with the HRMS providers out there, right? The systems out there, and then, you know, create this win-win solution to deliver greater value for the HR leaders. This is really tricky and depends from company to company, or rather industry to industry as well, right? Some industries are, you know, like naturally more open, have more open organizational cultures, right? They are more casual, right? Perhaps the technology industry, right? They are more casual. They are more willing to try new tools as well. Their management is very tech savvy, and they have a very authentic form of a much more authentic form of leadership. It's not those button up, you know, stiff stiff upper lip type of cultures. Those cultures tend to have leaders who are more willing to share. I mean, it's not just contained to the technology industry, right? For example, you look at Piyush Gupta from DBS as well. You know, like he is open, but you know, like it's a very large organization, right? The finance and banking industry typically have leaders who may or may not be so willing to share about their personal lives. There's that layer, right? And I'm not an organizational psychologist, but organizational psychologists will have the right frameworks and theories to talk about that. So at a HR manager level, those who are making the decisions, they do have to put in a stronger effort to connect with their management stories, right? They have to find the talking points, right? They can either come up with the talking points themselves, or they can try to work with their corporate communications to see whether this is something that can improve employer branding as well. Because these days, I think a company that is very proactive and promotes mental health is actually going to improve their employer branding. So I think that one idea here is that think of the messaging, think internally, how can you connect with the management and flesh out their story in a way that they are comfortable with? And that really boils down to building relationships with management, right? The other thing also is to tie in, this kind of relates a little bit to ROI, but I don't want to just start getting very quantitative as well. In big public companies, they have sustainability reports.
That's right.
These annual sustainability reports really put the onus and the pressure on the C-suite to talk about their sustainability efforts. Other than environmental sustainability, which everybody thinks about, people sustainability are very important. We talked earlier about talent retention and hiring and all that as well, right? You will see that in these sustainability reports, there's a lot of sharing about the numbers around absenteeism, presenteeism, and interestingly, about mental health and well-being programs as well. So we have been following the sustainability reports over the past few years, and we are noticing an upsurge, right, in terms of the mental health programs being shared in such sustainability reports as well. That, I think, ties in a lot with a key priority for high-level management, right, for executive management. They want to be seen as building a sustainable company. And one core component of that is people sustainability. Am I putting the right policies in place? Am I investing the right amounts as well, right, in order to actually make this company sustainable for my shareholders, for my board of directors, for my customers and users? This is always like a trick question, Sriram. It's like asking me what the future of work looks like. I know you are, but it's a fun question, and really I appreciate it as well, right? For me, I think the three key things. I think the future of the workplace is going to look nomadic. It's going to look more humane and quite Zoom centric or video oriented, right? Number one is that I think because people have gotten used to working out of the office, working in their homes, or as lockdowns start getting more relaxed in some parts of Asia, people are willing to work out of cafes, at the beach, whether, at Phuket Beach, Bali Beach, in Sentosa here in Singapore as well. I think people want that flexibility, right? The future of the workplace may look smaller because companies don't need to maintain so much commercial real estate anymore, right? And employees would like that flexibility to work some days out of their office, right? That's one. Second as well is that I think it's going to be more humane, more personal as well. People will be getting used to seeing kids in the background, in the foreground, cats or dogs in the background as well. I think it really helps to break down barriers between people and hopefully help teams work better as well. One thing that we have to take note of is that, and relate to the third point around being Zoom oriented or video oriented, is that the big barrier as well to actually building stronger relationships at work is whether people feel comfortable turning on their videos, right? We are quite an exception. I think, you can almost measure psychological safety in a team meeting by how many people are willing to turn on the video. And then if they turn on the video, are they actually willing to actually, remove a filter as well, right? For example, if you look closely at me, I've used a digital filter to make myself look younger. Otherwise, all my wrinkles and lines start showing up as well, right? Because, you're interviewing me. I haven't met you in person yet over a drink or something. If we do, then next time I will remove my filter. But I think a lot of workplaces are going to start thinking about their video policies, right? How do you not enforce, but encourage and make your environment healthier so that people are willing to share video so that you can get closer to building a stronger human bond over the laptops, right? It's a very small area, but I'm sure that there's a lot of human interaction, human-computer interaction, or HCI designers looking into this space. And I foresee this could be a very interesting space in organizational psychology for organizational psychologists to look at in future. Well, I think first thing first is that, the HR professional we have seen so far are quite tech savvy already. They are quite tech savvy already. I mean, they are doing all their work online, laptops, their mobile phones, and so on. I think one thing that is important is to help them understand the HR tech landscape. There can be too many tools involved out there, right? I know that you put out an annual map of all the tech players. I think that's super helpful to actually help them understand how each of them relates to one another, right? Traditionally as well, I think one thing is more certification courses, right? To actually help the HR professionals understand how to use data in their daily decision making, right? Because the whole reason why some of these professionals join the human resource space is because they enjoy that interaction, person-to-person interaction. They prioritize that. It's the same thing that we see in psychologists' React interactions as well. Many psychologists, psychiatrists, coaches, or counselors, they like their one-on-one format because, you know, like they are trained in that way to deliver one-on-one support, right? So same thing, they have to be taught about what digital therapy means. Similarly, right, HR professionals also have to learn how to build these bonds, you know, like with their increasingly digital and remote workforces as well, right? As their workforce get more physically remote, they have and need help, whether digitally, certifications or otherwise, to learn to be less digitally remote. They need to be able to build that bond. So I think whether it's professional certification classes, whether it's university courses as well, more has to be done over there. Right. I mean, yeah, for those who haven't really started, for those who are getting started or haven't started that digital HR journey, I would say that, you know, like the bandwagon is real and hop on it fast, right? Because upskilling is the name of the game in the entire workplace, right? And it's time for HR professionals to hop on it as well. Not to sound too trite, right, or simplistic, but 10, 15 years ago, none of us were using smartphones. For now, we use everything, right? We have super apps where we deliver our food, see our doctors, and buy all our groceries as well, right? And it's time to just, you know, like replace some of our more manual, non-digital processes with digital interviewing tools, with HRMS systems, with mental health, physical health systems as well, right? Join and hop on the digital bandwagon before it's too late.